The Galactic Concord, a sprawling alliance of species that prided itself on order and meticulous categorization, had a file on Homo sapiens. It wasn't a very thick file. Humanity was filed under Emerging Species, Tier 7, Benign Irritant. Their technological signature was loud, a chaotic babble of electromagnetic noise from their single home system, indicative of rapid, uncontrolled expansion, but in the grand scheme of galactic power, laughably primitive. They were known for their baffling internal conflicts, their bewildering array of cultures, and a peculiar trait the conquered xenopsychologists had flagged as excessive sentimentality. Chief among these sentiments was compassion, which most conquered strategists considered a debilitating weakness, a fatal flaw in the brutal calculus of survival among the stars. This assessment was about to be revised, drastically. Far from the Concord's well-patrolled core worlds, on the desolate, rocky planetoid designated Xylos 7, stood the Human Medical Research Facility, Hope's Reach. It wasn't a military outpost. Its only defenses were a standard meteor shield and a very stern quarantine protocol. Hope's Reach was a place of healing and study, specializing in rare xenoviruses and offering aid to species affected by blights and cosmic radiations that richer, more established worlds often ignored. Its patient roster was a mosaic of beings from across the local cluster, including a small, frightened contingent of Drikreen refugees, insectoid beings whose home world had been recently scoured by the Churek. The Churek, the name was a shiver across the galactic calms. They weren't a civilization, they were a plague, a nomadic swarm of biomechanical locusts, devouring entire planets for resources, communicating through a shrieking hive-mind frequency and understanding only consumption. When they appeared, most species simply fled if they could. Resistance was usually futile and short-lived. Aboard the conquered observer scout ship, Vigilant Gaze, parked discreetly behind Xylo's 7 largest moon, analyst first-class Tepmin adjusted his sensor array. His Gearithan face, a mask of calm, professional detachment, watched the holographic display. Churek swarm signature confirmed, Sector Primus, he reported to his captain. Vector, Xylos 7, estimated arrival, 0.7 standard cycles. Captain H-Law, a veteran of many observation missions, stroked his chin tendrils. Predictable. The Churek are drawn to uncontrolled energy signatures and biological material. Hope's Reach is a beacon for them. Inform Conquered High Command. Standard observation protocols apply. We will record the facility's demise. Another data point on human fragility. Tepmin nodded, though a flicker of something un-Gearithan, perhaps pity, crossed his mind. Humans. So prone to building their fragile hopes in the most dangerous of places. The alarm klaxons at Hope's Reach were not designed for subtlety. They shrieked through the corridors, a raw, metallic sound that sent shivers down every spine, human or otherwise. Dr. Aris Thorne, Chief Medical Officer, a man whose thinning hair and weary eyes spoke of too many long nights and impossible choices, felt his stomach clench. "Report," he barked into his comm. "Multiple unidentified contacts, sir," came the panicked voice of a young technician. "Massive energy readings. They look like the Churek profiles." Aris's blood ran cold. The Churek. Here. He looked around the central ward, at the human nurses calming terrified patients, at the alien faces looking to him for reassurance he didn't feel. Among them were the Drikreen, their multifaceted eyes wide with a racial terror he could only imagine. Evacuation protocols. His second-in-command, Dr. Lena Hansen, a bioengineer with a mind as sharp as her laser scalpels, asked, already moving towards the emergency lockers. Aris looked at the main display. The Churek swarm was a vast, angry red cloud descending upon them. Evacuation shuttles were few, designed for medical transport, not mass exodus. They could save the staff, perhaps, but the patients, especially the ones in critical care, the ones needing specialized life support, the Drikreen whose physiology was incompatible with rapid, unshielded flight. "We can't get them all out, Lena," Aris said, his voice heavy. "Not in time, not alive." The unspoken conquered expectation, as observed in countless similar scenarios with other lesser species, was clear. The able-bodied would save themselves. The weak would be abandoned. It was the harsh logic of survival. Lena met his gaze. Her own was fierce. Then we don't go. Around them, other staff members heard. Nurse Unit Head David Chen, a man built like a gentle bear, stepped forward. My team stays. We have patients who can't be moved without killing them. Sarah Ngomo, a young trauma specialist, nodded, her hand instinctively going to the small, trembling Drikreen child clutching her leg. I'm not leaving them. On the vigilant gaze, Tepmin zoomed in on the facility. Captain, I am detecting no evacuation launches. Internal communications indicate a consensus to remain. Captain H-Law raised an eye ridge. Remain? Against a full Churuk swarm, that is not logical. It is self-annihilation. Are they paralyzed by fear? Negative, Captain, Tepmin said, his voice tight with something new. They are preparing defenses. Defenses? Hope's Reach had no cannons, no torpedoes, no shielded fighters. What Aris Thorne had was a hospital full of brilliant minds, advanced medical technology, and a sudden, burning rage fueled by the oldest human instinct, to protect those in their care. All right, Aris announced, his voice ringing with a resolve that surprised even himself. The Churuk want what's in here. They'll have to get through us. Lena, I need every piece of equipment that can be repurposed. Think offensively. David, secure the patients. Barricade the wards. Non-essential personnel, assist with fortifications and medical supply lines. Sarah, you're with me. We need to understand Churuk biology fast. There must be weaknesses. The next few hours were a blur of frantic, ingenious activity that would have made any conquered military engineer stare in disbelief. Laser scalpels, designed for pinpoint surgery, were jury-rigged with larger power cells and mounted on articulated medical stands, becoming short-range, high-intensity cutting beams. Diagnostic ultrasound emitters were recalibrated to high-frequency sonic bursts, potentially capable of disrupting the Churuk's smaller scout forms or even their localized hive communication. Anesthetic gas lines were rerouted to external vents, ready to pump out concentrated sedatives. The sterilization bay's focused radiation emitters, normally used to sanitize equipment, were boosted, their shielding angled outwards. Dr. Hansen, covered in grease and wire strippings, her eyes gleaming with manic energy, directed teams modifying surgical robots. Their manipulators are precise enough to target joints in the Churuk exoskeletons. If we can get close enough, we can disable limbs. Sarah Ngomo, meanwhile, was hunched over a bioscanner with a captured, dead Churuk scout, a small, scuttling horror that had been unlucky enough to get zapped by a short-circuiting power conduit near the perimeter. Their carapace is thick, but look here. She pointed to a display showing microscopic fissures around sensory nodules. And their respiratory system, highly efficient, but the intake spiracles are surprisingly exposed, just beneath the primary mandibles. Pressurized irritants, Aris mused. Something that won't kill our own people, but will play hell with their breathing. The first wave of Churuk hit like a metallic tsunami. Thousands of skittering, multi-limbed drones, the size of large dogs, swarmed the outer walls, their claws screeching on the station's hull, searching for entry points. From the vigilant gaze, Captain H-Law watched, expecting the station's structure to be breached in minutes. Their efforts are spirited, he conceded, but ultimately futile. Then the futile began. At a reinforced viewport doubling as a makeshift bunker, Nurse Chen aimed a modified laser scalpel. A Churuk drone tried to pry open the viewport's emergency seals. Chen squeezed the trigger. A brilliant blue beam shot out, slicing through the drone's leg with surgical precision. The creature shrieked, a sound that grated on the ears even through the hull, and fell. Direct hit, someone yelled. A ragged cheer went up. From another section, Lena Hansen's team activated their sonic cannons. A disorienting wave of high-frequency sound washed over a cluster of Churuk, sending them into confused, twitching spasms, some even attacking each other. The Churuk hive mind, a vast, cold intelligence, registered surprise. This was not the typical response. Prey usually died or fled. This prey fought back, with tools. Larger Churuk warriors, armored brutes with razor-sharp mandibles, smashed through an outer wall of a cargo bay. Alarms blared. "They're in, Sector Gamma." Eris and Sarah raced towards the breach, flanked by two security personnel armed with repurposed rivet guns, not deadly, but capable of punching holes in thinner parts of the Churuk armor. Eris carried a modified chemical sprayer, filled with a potent, concentrated anesthetic mixed with a powerful enzymatic cleanser designed to break down organic proteins. It was meant for sterilizing biohazardous spills, not combat. They rounded a corner and faced three Churuk warriors. The creatures lunged. One security guard went down, a scream cut short. Eris didn't hesitate. He aimed for the head of the nearest Churuk, specifically the area Sarah had identified as having the respiratory spiracles. He fired. A cloud of aerosolized chemicals enveloped the Churuk's head. The creature stumbled, wheezing, its mandibles clicking in distress. It clawed at its face, then collapsed, twitching. Sarah, meanwhile, had ducked under the clumsy swing of another warrior and jammed the nozzle of a high-pressure cryospray, normally used for flash-freezing tissue samples, against a joint in its leg. She blasted it. The super-chilled gas caused the chitin to become brittle, and with a sickening crack, the leg joint shattered. The warrior toppled, screaming its alien fury. On the vigilant gaze, Tepmin was rapidly inputting data, his usual calm replaced by something akin to excitement. "Captain, the humans they are exploiting specific biological weaknesses of the Churuk. Their medical knowledge, they are using it as a combat doctrine." Captain H-Law was silent, his gaze fixed on the holographic display. He saw a human nurse pull a wounded colleague back from a breach, then turn and empty a canister of rapidly expanding medical foam into the hole, sealing it temporarily, the foam hardening almost instantly. He saw another human, a lab technician by his uniform, use a focused beam from a genetic sequencer, designed to analyze DNA, to apparently overload the optical sensors of a Churuk scout, causing it to reel back blindly. This wasn't a battle. It was an act of desperate, brilliant, compassionate defiance. They weren't fighting for territory or resources or glory. They were fighting for the lives in their care. They were fighting for the Drikreen refugees huddled in the central ward, refugees the Conquered itself had catalogued as collateral damage in the Churuk's relentless advance. One particularly vicious Churuk variant, a heavily armored tunneler, managed to breach the main corridor leading to the patient wards. It was a killing machine, shrugging off rivet gun impacts and sonic blasts. David Chen and two young nurses stood as the only line of defense before the Drikreen ward. They had one laser scalpel, nearly out of power, and a barricade of medical supply crates. "For them," David muttered, hefting a heavy oxygen tank like a club. The tunneler charged. The laser scalpel fired, scoring a glowing line across its carapace but failing to stop it. It smashed through the barricade. Just as it was about to rip into David, something small and fast shot out from a side corridor. It was one of Lena Hansen's modified surgical robots, no bigger than a small dog itself, but armed with three manipulators tipped with diamond-edged rotary saws normally used for bone surgery. It latched onto the tunneler's exposed neck joint, its saws whirring at incredible speed. Black ichor sprayed. The tunneler thrashed, its advance halted, trying to dislodge the tenacious little machine. This gave David the opening he needed. With a roar, he swung the oxygen tank, smashing it against the side of the Churuk's head. The creature staggered, disoriented. The surgical robot's saws bit deeper. Finally, with a grotesque tearing sound, the tunneler's head was nearly severed. It collapsed, inert. David leaned against the wall, gasping, the tank clattering from his numb fingers. The two nurses, shaken but resolute, immediately began checking him for injuries. The Churuk hive mind experienced something akin to frustration. The resistance was disproportionate to the target's apparent strength. These soft creatures, these Tier 7 irritants, were proving incredibly difficult to digest. Their tactics were unpredictable, their determination illogical. The cost-benefit analysis of consuming this small, irritating rock was starting to tilt. The assault began to wane. The smaller Churuk drones, facing unexpectedly high attrition, pulled back. The larger warriors, confused by the bizarre and effective countermeasures, hesitated. The hive mind, accustomed to overwhelming force and rapid capitulation, paused its relentless drive. There were easier planets, less annoying prey. With a final, furious shriek that echoed through the station, the Churuk swarm began to withdraw from Xylos 7, leaving behind a battered but unbroken Hope's Reach. Silence descended, broken only by the sobbing relief of a Drikreen child and the weary sighs of the human defenders. Aboard the vigilant gaze, the atmosphere was thick with an uncharacteristic emotion for GR-Ithans. Astonishment. "Captain," Tepmin said, his voice barely a whisper. They did it. They held." Captain H-Law stared at the image of Hope's Reach, scarred and smoking, but still broadcasting a defiant, life-sustaining energy signature. His understanding of the universe had just been fundamentally shaken. He had witnessed a species classified as weak and overly emotional repel one of the galaxy's most feared mindless predators, not with warships, but with scalpels, scanners, and an unyielding refusal to abandon the helpless. Their compassion hadn't been a flaw, it had been their shield and their sword. It had fueled a ferocity and ingenuity that logic alone could never have produced. "Tepmin," Captain H-Law said, his voice resonating with newfound respect. "Prepare a full report for Conquered High Command. Reclassify Homo sapiens immediately. Suggested new designation. Tier 3, unpredictable protectors. And open a channel to Hope's Reach. Identify ourselves. Offer all available medical aid and technical assistance. It seems," he added, a strange curve to his lips that might have been a GR-Ithan smile, "we have much to learn from these benign irritants." The message from the vigilant gaze was received with stunned silence at Hope's Reach, followed by a wave of exhausted elation. The Galactic Conquered, the aloof, mighty Galactic Conquered, was offering them aid. The legend of Hope's Reach spread like wildfire through the Conquered. The story of the doctors and nurses who stood against the Churuk, armed with their healing tools and their unbreakable compassion. Other species began to look at humanity differently. The loud, squabbling primitives had shown a capacity for courage and resilience that few superior races could match. They fought not for conquest, but for care. And that, the galaxy was beginning to realize, made them a very different kind of power. A power you wanted on your side, and a power you would be foolish to provoke by threatening those they chose to protect. Humanity's compassion, once dismissed as a weakness, was now seen as the wellspring of a terrifyingly potent form of strength.